My name is Braden Alexander, and today I'm going to be going over the issue of northern pike in the Columbia River system, as well as the Pend Oreille River and Box Canyon Reservoir. Northern pike are an invasive species of fish. We're going to start out with that. They have been illegally introduced into the Washington state river systems and Alaska river systems, Canada water systems, and other systems in the United States, especially in Montana, where they were first brought illegally. And ever since getting introduced into those systems, we've been seeing a pattern of destruction of other species. Pike explode in population while others completely dwindle. And on that note of giving a little background, I want to go over the personal attachment I have to fishing in Washington. Fishing has been huge for me, and before me, it was huge for my grandfather, and the entire Van Vleck side of my family, in fact. Van Vlecks have been fishing for salmon and other species all this time. It was embedded in my grandpa's work, in fact. They would go on huge fishing trips up to British Columbia and catch lots of salmon, lots of other fish, and come back and we would eat salmon and we would eat all these other fish, and it was a great time. It was always celebrated, really, these fishing trips. They're huge. And my grandfather's always been an avid fisherman, and he as soon as I could, he would take me out. We enjoyed really fishing on Rimrock, catching as many silvers as we could, really. There was a limit, but it was a huge limit. And they're just like miniature salmon. We would eat them, but I enjoy catching and eating salmon more than any other fish. And not just eating, but salmon are just huge to me. I've always loved catching salmon. They've always been this really big part of my outdoor life. We fish as often as I can, whether it's with my father and his family or my grandfather and his family. And this pike offers this threat. In Alaska, salmon populations have been not cold, but destroyed by pike in a large part. And pike, really, if you get right down to it, Justin Bush from the Washington Invasive Species Council says that they just like to eat the fish we like. And that's really true. They eat bull trout, they eat steelhead, they even eat juvenile sturgeon. And it's just they just offer this huge threat overall, and they've grown in threat recently as we're starting to offer more bounties and we're starting to pour more money. Before this year, we were spending $60,000 to $80,000 on pike culling efforts a year, and officials say that's not enough. We need to quintuple that. We need to quintuple our spending on pike extermination to $400,000 a year, and that just shows you kind of what we haven't been doing enough to stop it. We haven't been taking the threat seriously, and that I'm saying that, and it's rather bold of me to say because from 2012 to 2016, 17,000 northern pike were caught and killed in Box Canyon Reservoir by the Klesbel tribe and other tribes and other government agencies. And that's a lot of fish. And even with that happening, after that, they bounced back and spread down Lake Roosevelt after getting 17,000 of their species wiped out. I want to go back a little bit here, though, and talk about just their explosive capability. In 2004, 400 pike were found in the Box Canyon Reservoir. That was it. They counted 400 pike. In 5 years, in that same reservoir, their population skyrocketed, while other fish around them dwindled. 10,000 pike were found in 2009 and counted it. And that's when we kind of thought, well, we need to start to deal with this. And so, we have that 2012-2016 figure of 17,000 fish. They started taking the threat a little more seriously, and they really went crazy with killing them. I don't want to say going crazy because they're an invasive species and they're not good here, so you can't really go crazy with them, but they killed a lot. And that's good, of course, because we can't have them affecting our salmon up here. And I say that, but up until recently, they haven't been affecting our salmon. They really haven't. They haven't gotten past Lake Roosevelt. But I said they spread to Lake Roosevelt earlier, and that's also a concern because they haven't been that far down. And if they get past the Chief Joseph Dam and the Grand Coulee Dam, they have the potential to upset and dwindle salmon population and steelhead populations. And that's horrible, of course, because we've spent so much money. We've spent billions of dollars in salmon recovery, and it has the potential to be completely just wasted with this pike population. And that's horrible to me. And Dr. Brett Nichols of the Spokane Tribes Fishery and Water Resource Division brings up that one of the tools we have in our toolbox here is an all-hands-on approach. So the thing is, we have a lot of stakeholders. Native American tribes, huge stakeholders. Salmon are important to them, and so they take the threat very seriously of this fish. And government officials, of course, take this threat seriously because salmon aren't a huge part of our economy, of course, but commercial fishermen are, again, not huge in our economy, but they are, of course, cared for, and we can't have their companies be affected that poorly by this. And so we see a lot of support for this culling here. Mr. Nichols, of course, says that we started to work with partners who care about the Columbia River ecosystem. And so that's another glimmer of hope here, or a first mentioned, of course, glimmer of hope, is that we have a lot of people who care about this issue. And so lack of care and lack of emotion, lack of attention is not a problem. It's just lack of resources. We didn't have enough money spent on the problem, and now they've spread farther than they ever have. And, of course, we started to implement a fish bounty. This is led by the Colville tribe. And so a lot of incentive is going into killing them now. And we're starting new techniques. Well, they're not new, but they're newly implemented by government agencies. The Kalispel tribe and Colville tribes have been using gill netting techniques, and those have been very successful. Gill netting is what led to the 17,000 caught in 2012-2016, and so with that, we can really start to get at them better, and that's a really good thing here. That's a glimmer of hope, is that although this species is really invasive, really pervasive, really destructive, we have techniques that are equally so. And so overall, I would say that we can do this, and it's not that outside of the realm of possibility. I say that, it sounds dramatic, but really, this fish species is really resilient and really a big problem. And so it's good to see that we have this ability to stop them. However, they're still regarded as a huge issue, even though we have these, we've had these successful cullings, we've had these successful ways of dealing with them. They're still taken very seriously. They've been up to the number one threat in invasive species, or not the number one, but a number one threat, sort of a DEFCON 1, if you will. They've been brought up there, and we have the bounties, as I brought up earlier, $10 fish bounties led by the Colville tribe, and they're encouraging all fishermen just to catch and kill pike, and to kill them on site. And if they're reported below the Chief Joseph dams and Grand Coulee dams, they should be killed and reported instantly. This is brought up by Justin Bush from the Washington Invasive Species Council. Bush also had to say that we've seen the crash of other ecosystems because of this in Alaska and California. They crash entire fisheries. We can see the huge destructive capability from what's happened in Alaska with these fish, where they decimated populations of salmon. We, of course, don't want that down here, because salmon are still untouched by them pretty much, and we need to continue that as much as possible. We need to make sure they don't get past the Grand Coulee Dam and the Chief Joseph Dam, and we need to start gill netting the heck out of them in Lake Roosevelt, because that's been shown to work. The problem with Lake Roosevelt is so big, and it houses so many and such a widespread population. And another issue with pike here is they just present all kinds of issues because they spawn. Their only requirement is to spawn in shallow water. So they spawn in a lot of areas, and they just spread like crazy. That's kind of why Box Canyon Reservoir had so many. They spawn at alarming rates. And so what I want to take away here is that we've seen in the past that these fish can be stopped. And so, what kind of bothers me is that it wasn't taken seriously. In 2016, we stopped kind of trying very hardly. Box Canyon Reservoir, they were all killed from gill netting pretty much. And so we said, okay, that's enough. Let's stop for a while, and let's take this a little less seriously. And the Kalispel tribe was really successful, and props to them, really, because it's not really an issue in Box Canyon anymore. But we kind of took a more lax approach for a while, and then they spread down to Lake Roosevelt, and everybody's going crazy again. And even though 17,000 fish were killed in the Box Canyon Reservoir, They caught another 2,000 in the Pend d'Oreille River just last year in 2018, and that's pretty close to Box Canyon. And it just shows the resilience of these fish and the just how much of an annoyance they are, really, a bother. And the worst thing about them is that they're not good to eat. They're useless. They are a delicacy in some countries, but not in the United States. And the only people that can really eat them with like efficiency and effectivity are adult men, adult women, just adults in general, I would suppose. But they have, if they weren't bad enough, they accumulate high levels of mercury beneath their scales. Pregnant women can't eat them because they are so threatening with their mercury levels. It's odd, as well as younger kids and older people, of course. The generic people to be affected with disease and colds and other things like that. Mercury is a threat to them with these fish. So they don't have any use, really. Their sole purpose is to destroy populations of the fish we love. The good news is they haven't made it into the anadromous zone, where migrating fish like salmon like to swim upriver. So that's good, of course. But it's still just this pervasive problem. Lake Roosevelt, when they started testing for them, they found them in 70% of all nets placed down. They placed down 151 nets in Lake Roosevelt to test for them. They found fish in 70% of them. And Lake Roosevelt, keep in mind, is a huge lake, and they found that many fish in there. And it just shows their, again, resilience and what a problem they can be. There's an estimated impact in Washington State of $33 million. It's another problem. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of support going towards fighting them, so that's a huge highlight. The only call to action I can say is what I kind of said earlier, is we need to take it a little more seriously. In the past, we spent a lot less money than we needed, as experts predicted. Outside of the Box Canyon Reservoir, we didn't use effective techniques. Gill netting is it's really effective against these fish. We've seen that. And so we need to implement more gill netting, and we need to take the problem a lot more seriously, in my opinion. It's easy to ignore it, A lot of people don't think about this as a problem. A lot of people don't wake up and say, pike are starting to threaten our salmon. We think pollution, we think economic problems, we think all that. And I just kind of want to bring up the fact that a huge fish to our state, huge in the sense of impact, is really threatened. It's kind of crazy. Before engaging myself in this passion project, I hadn't even known that pike were such a problem. And so I guess my main takeaway is just we need to start informing people, I guess, on this issue. We need to start telling people just like what an issue it is. I find it crazy that it kind of went silent for so long. Even trying to find articles to support this little audio recording were hard to find and were hard to come by. A lot of official sites have it, such as the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. But other than that, it's not much. It's a lot of official sites. In fact, Spokane Public Radio is a huge contributor in my information here from the words of Justin Bush and other things. And I find it kind of interesting that it's just kind of gone under the radar for so long. And so that's a huge thing I think we need to do. We need to start alerting the public. It's not that pressing to where we start alerting the public, but we need to start educating more people on the problem. And I think that the government needs to take it more seriously. We need to get to that $400,000 threshold that was brought up earlier. We only spent $60,000 to $80,000. We need to quintuple that. How do we need to quintuple that? That's what I wonder. How did the problem get so bad that we need to raise the money 5 times the amount? It was discovered 15 years ago, this problem. And 15 years later now, we just now realize that we need to spend that much money and we need to start to cull them. And I find that kind of irritating that it wasn't brought up earlier. It wasn't attacked at the level it needed to be earlier. And so overall, I want to kind of take away that Lake Roosevelt is the last place that pike can be without causing major, major, major damage. They've already caused a lot of damage to bull trout and kokanee and other fish. But Lake Roosevelt is as Justin Bush again said, it's kind of the battle for these pike is going to be won or lost on Lake Roosevelt. Lake Roosevelt is the last place that we can have these fish without it being that big of a problem. And so that's where we need to focus. That's where we need to stop them. I want to bring up the fact again that we have a lot of support for problems with these pike. And I think that's great. We need to keep pushing. And although we have that support, we need more money. We need more people to really step in and do this, handle this problem. I think that there is great hope for solving this. So that's great. It's not an issue that's going to last a lifetime or last a long time. We can deal with the pike today. We can deal with the pike tomorrow. And that's a huge takeaway here, is that it's very solvable, in my opinion. We saw huge amounts cold in the Box Canyon Reservoir, and they never bounced back fully there. They left to Lake Roosevelt, and they're starting to spread there, and they're still kind of prevalent in Pend Oreille, where they originated, but they're really almost dealt with in a lot of places. It's just that we haven't taken it seriously enough to where we can have them fully dealt with in Lake Roosevelt and other places like that. And I just find it kind of overall frustrating. I think I highlighted that earlier, that it's been largely dealt with in a lot of places, but they still spread and they still persist. And we need to start to take it a lot more seriously before they start to reach our lower places in the Columbia. Again, support's huge. That's great. But general support is not enough. We need to start getting the government involved here. We need to get more money spent. We need to get more people out there. And we need to start to get rid of the problem overall. And so that's my, I guess, call to action in the end here, is that it needs $400,000 a year spent on the problem. As I sit here now, I kind of think back to all those times I've spent fishing. And, the future looks bright, I will say. It is a solvable problem. It's a quite easily solvable problem. It just needs the resources, and it's not getting it. Not right now, at least. Hopefully with the classification level of the threat brought to 1, that'll be more taken more seriously, so that's good. I'm brought back to, I don't want to say that I was pacing my room thinking about salmon, because that's ridiculous, but there was this kind of sinking feeling that the fish that I like to catch were being destroyed, or had the potential to be, and that kind of is a new feeling. You never think of it like that. You never think that they're going to be gone. And then with my research on pike, I've learned that they can be gone, and it's quite easily achieved for them to be gone. This pike population simply needs to get down to Lower Columbia and destroy them. And with the huge human problem on salmon populations and the dam problem on salmon populations, it really kind of dawns on me that the fish I love to catch, the fish that we've always had to catch, the fish that my grandfather loved to catch, are not going to be here forever if we don't stop our behavior on them, especially with dams, and if we don't stop these pike, more importantly. Our behavior can be changed. Pike can be changed, and that's good. That's a silver lining here, is that they don't have to be killed. It's easy to stop the pike. I know that that's opinions coming from an 18-year-old high school student, but really, after researching everything and seeing what certain techniques have done to them, and what just an increase in spending will do, I think it's a very solvable problem, and I am left kind of warm-hearted by that. I don't have to worry about salmon being gone. I don't have to worry about taking my kids in the future to go catch these salmon in steelhead. I can carry out with one of my favorite hobbies, and I can kind of rest easy knowing that. And that's kind of where I want to end this, is the fact that it's a very solvable problem. We don't need to worry that much for the future, I would say. I would say all the worry has to be directed to the here and now. If we can deal with them now, if we can stop them in Lake Roosevelt, if we can stop their spread from to the south, the Lower Columbia, then it's kind of a solved problem. And I want to end saying also that they need to be taken seriously, but they don't need to be worried about. We can deal with them. With just a little more spending and with copying of close spell techniques. We can stop the impact of $30 million to Washington State that's projected. We can stop them from destroying our favorite fish populations, and we can stop them from spreading. We need to learn from Alaska and Canada and California, where they've been detrimental to salmon populations, and we need to stop it here. Luckily, we have 2 dams blocking them from the lower Columbia, and that's good. It's a huge deterrent, but I think that with them raised to a Class 1 threat level, that this can be dealt with, and this will be dealt with.